Senator Paul.
You know, I think the discussion over vaccines is so oversimplified and dumbed down that we never really get to real truths. And it's why people up here are so separated from real people at home. So we talk about hepatitis B. It's a terrible disease. It could lead to liver failure, as the chairman said. But the reason you have distrust from people at home, why they don't believe anything you say, and they don't believe government at all, is you're telling my kid to take a hepatitis B vaccine when he's 1 day old. You get it through drug use and sexually transmitted. That's how you get hepatitis B. But you're telling me my kid has to take it at 1 day old. You're not. That's not science. And so every person with a bit of common sense, even people who don't resist vaccines, I vaccinated all my kids. I believe vaccines are one of the modern miracles beyond all pale. The Speckled Monster is a great book about the introduction of the smallpox vaccine in 1720 into our country. All miracles. But I'm not a one-size-fits-all. It's not all or nothing. I chose to wait on my hepatitis B vaccine, and we did it when they went to school. Does that make me an awful person? Does that make me an anti-vaxxer because I questioned the government dictate of whether I do it? And I'm not speaking for anybody else. I'm only speaking for myself. But for goodness sakes, let's have an honest debate about these things. The COVID vaccine. If you ask me my opinion, the reporters run up and down the aisle and they say, you still anti-vaccine? No, I'm pro-vaccine. But on the COVID vaccine, and on the COVID illness, there was a 1,000-fold or more difference between the elderly and children. If you don't acknowledge that, you're committing malpractice. You're showing your ignorance. If you say a 6-month-old must be mandated to get it, the science is not there. So all this blather about the science says this and the science says that, no, it doesn't. The science actually shows that no healthy child in America died from COVID. Look it up. No healthy child died from COVID. And so the thing is that it's 1,000-fold greater. So if you ask me my advice as a physician, if you were 65 or older or overweight and some other conditions, I would have said, hell yes, I'd take the COVID vaccine. The risks of the disease were real and much greater than the vaccine. But if you ask me, should my healthy 6-month-old get it? See, these are the nuances you're unwilling to talk about because there's such a belief in submission. Submit to the government. Do what you're told. There is no discussion. There ought to be a debate. You're not going to let him have the debate because you're just going to criticize and say, it is this, and admit to it, or we're not going to appoint you. But it's more complicated than that. And this is why people distrust government, because you're unwilling to have these conversations. And go home. Ask your Democrat young mothers, your Republican young mothers, if they're vaccinating their kid for hepatitis B, and they're like, well, do I have to do it on day one? It's this precious little baby. Is there science to say you shouldn't do it? Probably not, but it's my kid. You know, it's like, there isn't clear-cut science saying not to. But on autism, there's no good science of anything to show what causes autism. We don't know. It's a profound disease. I know many moms here and dads who have kids with autism. I know them personally. I've met their kids. But the thing is they saw their kids developing completely normal, maybe speaking 100 words go to no words at about 15 months of age. Now, there isn't proof. There isn't proof that the vaccines cause it. That's true. There isn't proof that it causes it. But we don't know what causes it yet, so shouldn't we be at least open-minded? We take 72 vaccines. Could it be? I don't know. But we shouldn't just close the door and say we're no longer, because we believe so much in submission, we're not going to have an open mind to study these things. And so it's sort of this crazy notion. Schizophrenia, I would put in the same notion. You have a kid who's completely normal to 18 or 19, and their brain goes haywire. How does that happen? It's the most bizarre disease. Shouldn't we be open? Could it be our food? It might be vaccines, it might be our food, but autism is more common. I don't know about the schizophrenia statistics, but autism is more common. Shouldn't we want to be open-minded? Instead, we're so closed-minded and we're so consensus-driven that the science says this. Well, science doesn't say anything. Science is a dispute, and 10 years from now, we could all be wrong. We were told in the beginning, 20 years ago, they did this enormous study, and they said, everybody over 50 should take an aspirin. I thought, well, that's a pretty good idea. It makes sense. But you know what? 20 years later, they measured it. And they found if you had no heart disease and you were taking aspirin, your chance of dying from a brain bleed or from a stomach bleed were greater than the risk of heart disease. If you have heart disease, they still say take an aspirin. If you don't, they've changed their mind 20 years later. But would you have all said I was crazy and I should no longer be in public discourse if I had said 20 years ago, I don't feel like taking an aspirin. I ride my bike all the time. I'm afraid I might hit my head. But that's what country's about. It's what dissent is about. So just ask you to look at the larger picture and give the guy a break who says, I just want to follow the science where it leads without presupposition. I think really what we have up here is presupposition. You've already concluded. It's absolute that autism isn't caused by it. We don't know what causes autism, so we should be more humble in what we say. Sorry I didn't get to a question.
For the record, if a child is born to a hepatitis B mother, that child may have a 95% chance of becoming a chronic carrier. But if the
And we vaccinate those people, and nobody's against that.
But if the child,
that's a very small percentage and a red herring. That is not what we're talking about. 99.9% of kids don't have a hepatitis B, Mom. And could they wait a while? Could they get vaccinated 3 months or a year? Yes.
So again, for the record, if the mother's hepatitis B status is known, then that can be delayed. The problem is oftentimes, or at least a significant percentage of the time, the mother's status is not known. If she's hepatitis B positive, a vaccine on day one of life prevents chronic hepatitis B 95% of the time. So it really depends upon the knowledge of the mother's hepatitis B status. And when they used to do just, okay, we know the mother's status or not, there's mothers that snuck through. Their status was unknown. We can blame the OBs, yeah, Marshall. But for the record, there is an absolute rationale for that. But you're right. If the mother's status is definitively known, that it can be safely delayed. So now, Senator Murray.